So good morning, everyone. It is really a great pleasure to see so many faces in person, and I know that we have another 200 people joining us on Zoom, so welcome to everybody. My name is Michael Weisberg. I'm the Interim Director of Prairie World House, and again, it's my great pleasure to welcome you. This is a really exciting event. This is part of a series we call Global Lens, which looks at policy from the point of view of the arts. And today we have a really special treat in the literal and figurative sense for you. So we are going to be welcoming three really remarkable people to talk about the role of food in diplomacy. And I'm just going to go ahead and introduce them because these are the people you'd want to hear from. So three people. The first is chef, author, and television star Amanda Freitag, who has worked in many, many restaurants over the years, including Bung and Verbena. But I want to mention one very important one to me, which is that she was a chef at L'Arpège, which is the place that I went to on my honeymoon in Paris. So very important connection to my life. Outside of the restaurant business, Amanda is well known for being a judge on the Food Network's program Chopped and on Iron Chef America. And she is the author of the wonderful cookbook, The Chef Next Door. Joining her on stage is Philadelphia's own Michael Solomonov, who many of you know as the chef of Zahav and many other restaurants, including Federal Donuts, Dizengoff, Goldig, Far, Laser Wolf, and Lila. Mike Solomonov is the co-author of 3 cookbooks and the recipient of 5 James Beard Awards, including Outstanding Restaurant for Zahav. He has been recently appointed by President Biden to the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition. And finally, our moderator is a well-known to this crowd, well-known to Prairie World House, the Lauren Bernstein, the founder and CEO of the Culinary Diplomacy Project. This is a nonprofit organization that seeks to promote cross-cultural awareness through global culinary engagement. Last year, Lauren was here as a visiting fellow at Prairie World House, and as part of her work with us and with many others, she partners with this global network of world-renowned celebrity chefs to engage communities, governments, NGOs, and the media in an effort to build and strengthen international relationships through food. Before this work with the Culinary Diplomacy Project, Lauren served as the director of the Diplomatic Culinary Partnership at the United States Department of State. So please join me in welcoming these 3 remarkable people to Prairie World House.
Hey, everyone. So quiet.
I know. So chefs are not quiet. Very deep chairs.
Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Prairie World House, for having us today. We're really excited to be here. I've really enjoyed my visiting fellowship, getting to know some of you and interacting with this fantastic faculty. Thank you both, Mike and Amanda, for being here today. We're really excited to have this conversation. So today we're talking about culinary diplomacy. And if you're not familiar with culinary diplomacy, the definition is the use of food and cuisine as instruments to create cross-cultural understanding in the hopes of improving interactions and cooperation. So it's really about using food to connect people and to build relationships and trust. Under the umbrella term of culinary diplomacy, there are a few different ways that you can engage. One is government to government, and that is when you see governments doing like state dinners, state visits, where they're doing that formal diplomacy to show respect to a visiting government. Then there's government to foreign public engagement, and that's when a government uses food as soft power diplomacy to encourage cultural exchange with citizens of another country. That's when, for example, our U.S. Embassy will bring a chef or a musician to a foreign country to engage with the public and to, again, form relationships. And then the final is citizen to citizen, when non-state actors engage in cultural exchange intended to improve cross-cultural relations. And that's a lot of what we do at our project. We are traveling to different countries and engaging the citizens and having those cross-cultural exchanges through cooking and cuisine. So I'm gonna start off our conversation today, focused a little bit on this government to foreign public engagement concept. So I'm going to start with you, Amanda. Hi,
everybody.
Amanda, you recently participated in a program with us and the U.S. Embassy in Armenia, acting as a cultural ambassador from the U.S. Can you tell us a bit more about that experience, how you balance the sharing of American culture with learning about the people you're visiting, and how is this type of program important to the U.S.'s diplomatic efforts?
Okay, that's a lot in one mouthful, but I had the great fortune, and thank you, Lauren, for help making that happen, of visiting Armenia. We were mostly in Yerevan, and it was a city that just wowed me. It was beautiful, and everybody was excited to share their culture with us. So it wasn't as if we had to pull teeth or anything. I mean, it was really, truly open arms, welcome. And we did anything from cooking classes at a culinary school to a cooking competition at a culinary school. Mind you, I do not speak Armenian. So that was a very interesting experience, to meeting with chefs, to doing a food and wine festival there. So it was really interesting to do things that I do here in the US and flip it and do it in Armenia. And Armenian wines have been made for 6,000 years. They're one of the oldest winemakers in the world. The food there is absolutely delicious, and they are generous, very generous with their food, and proud. They're very proud of their food culture. They make honey wine. They make all sorts of different red wine, white wine, sparkling wine. Their cheeses are incredible, big part of their food culture as well. All the spices that they do, all the pickles that they do, going to the markets was really exciting. And again, like I said, everybody was excited to show me what they do and how they do it. And I got to learn a lot about their culture and cook a lot of their foods as well, including learning how to make lavash, which you probably know is not as easy as it looks. And I think what was also interesting was how much the Armenians wanted to let me know that they are a big food culture, and that they want the US to know that as well, and that they don't get as many props as French cuisine, Italian cuisine. Many of the highly regarded cuisines here may not be Armenian, and it was really good for me to come back and continue to talk about that food. And I think that's the biggest benefit to the culinary diplomacy: to go to another country, have those relationships, connect over food, like I said, without even speaking the language, and then coming back and speaking about it. And a lot of the Armenians who had family in California or New York would say to me, now that you're going to start talking about it, you're going to know how many Armenians you actually know. Or people will say, well, I'm Armenian. And it did happen. And I think there's a struggle because it's not somewhere where you would just say, I'm going to go to Armenia this summer. It's not somewhere where people visit just because, but it's a gorgeous city. And I think everybody's missing out if you don't visit Yerevan. And if you go outside of Yerevan, the countryside is stunning. So for me, it's just about talking about everything I learned when I get back, and then of course, sharing the commonality, and I'm sure Michael can talk about this too, of chefs all over the world, food people all over the world, people who make a product and want to showcase it, people who cook in a restaurant. We have all the same issues, all the same problems. Chefs, cooks, they want to learn. They want to always up their game. We did a seminar about the art of plating, simply how to put food on a plate. And that could have gone on for hours, talking about how to do it, why to do it. We all took a little challenge and some ingredients and put together on a plate. It's everybody's different perspectives. And so for me, I always come back enriched with learning about how everybody else in the world looks at food and how we look at food and how everybody's point of view is unique. But at the same time, like Lauren said, it's amazing how we connect at the table over food. And again, Armenian is not one of the languages that I speak. It's a very difficult one, but when there was food at the table, we had no problem communicating.
When you were in Armenia, you guys were well covered.
Yes.
There was a lot of coverage of it. You had a lot of people sort of running around with you. How do you feel? Do you feel that there was a diplomatic impact? Do you feel like you came there representing the US? And do you think that, it was effective form of diplomacy?
Yeah, I think it was a really effective form of diplomacy in the way that we showed a lot of the chefs and the purveyors there that made the products that we got to see that they're important to us. And I think that was one of the main things that I wanted to say to a lot of the, especially female entrepreneurs. We had a female entrepreneur seminar that we know that they're there. We know you're here. Even if there's 2 people in a bakery somewhere, we know you're working really hard. And I think it's a struggle because they don't always have somebody to talk to. We have this big chef community. We talk about our issues. As soon as we get together, we start talking about the struggles of our businesses, but not everybody there has that opportunity to do that. And again, that female entrepreneur seminar could have gone on for days, actually. The questions, the ideas, the same issues, how do we solve them? What's it like in America? How do you do it? How do you keep your audience engaged? All the things that anybody who runs any kind of business wants to know. So I think my impact to them was, you're not alone and your issues are our issues. And, we're one community that shares all the same problems, and I think they felt maybe that they were listened to. And I think that's really important.
Mike, I'm going to shift to you and sort of focus on this citizen to citizen form of culinary diplomacy. You've opened multiple restaurants focused on Israeli cuisine. First of all, what inspired you to open a restaurant focused on Israeli cuisine? And when putting a restaurant like that together with such a diverse culinary culture in Israel, how do you even begin to figure out how you're going to represent that country?
Yeah, I mean, those are 2 questions that I sort of ask myself every day. I think they evolve. Very simply, I just felt like where I was from was not being represented accurately. It's just, I don't know. I think we get in this habit here of turning on the television and staring at the news for 4 minutes and deciding that we know everything that there is about sort of, either foreign policy or what's happening globally. And I just felt like there was I wanted to cook food that represented where I was from. And with all the sort of warts and with all the conflict and the commonality, that is a challenge, but I just felt like I wanted to do something that was meaningful. And I wanted to represent a place that I think is often misunderstood. And as far as sort of redefining that cuisine, I mean, that changes all the time. We're talking about, like over 100 different gastronomies and cultures that are either indigenous or have sort of traveled through. So it's always changing and it's always evolving. And I think the older I get, and the more sort of people that I'm exposed to and the more stories and the more places that I've visited, despite certain taboos between, Israeli and Palestinian cuisine and culture and communities, it's sort of eye-opening. So I'm enthralled as much as I was 15 years ago when we opened Zahav, as I am today. And I think that, I'm continuing to learn and sort of listen and grow. And there's also something about actually being in Eastern Pennsylvania, which could not be more different than like the Middle East, and so we opened this restaurant and I'm like, we're going to serve salat katsutz, which is like chopped salad, Arabic salad, Israeli, like whatever you want to call it. Chopped salad, which, 30 different countries basically make over there. And I was like, it's February in Pennsylvania and it's 7 degrees Fahrenheit and these tomatoes taste like shit. And I can't do that, and which is very, very challenging. So we actually had to take all the different cuisines, which you'd sort of find over there, but there was no real, there was a tapestry, not like a melting pot, right? And this sort of ability or this like license that we have, because we're so far away, to literally dissect and say, okay, I like the tershi from Libyan cuisine. I like hummus from Palestinian cuisine. I like kibbeh from Aleppo, from Syrian cuisine. Like, to be able to take all those things and mix them up would actually piss a lot of people off in Israel. And here, it didn't really matter because we don't have tomatoes like 9 months out of the year. And so we can kind of do what we want. And it gave us actually, I mean, people call Zahav a modern Israeli restaurant. We cook food on sticks over charcoal. It's not modern, but the idea that we can take all these different sort of gastronomies and shake them up and mix them up and use things like spices and techniques to imply things that we get back home is what has allowed us, I think, to be really creative, and for Zav to reach or attempt to reach its potential, and for me to be fulfilled. And as far as diplomacy goes, I mean, we're talking about one of the most contentious discussions ever, and to constantly reevaluate what my role is, what my power is, what my responsibility is to sort of, untangle or promote commonality between Israelis and Palestinians is a question that I try to answer, or at least, contemplate every single day.
Do you feel like your customers have learned more about Israel and the culture and through your restaurants?
I think so, but I mean, the reality is we're also a restaurant, and I want people to come in and enjoy themselves. And so, yes, to answer your question, yes, I do. And I think that I'm hoping that the impact that we make as business owners, as restaurateurs, as unofficial ambassadors is not limited to just having a great meal, but quite honestly, as a chef, that's what I want you to do the most. I want you to come in and eat and taste things and experience things that are like maybe very different, and that at the end of the day help, accurately narrate a place that I really love. And it's funny. It can be a discussion. It can be feeling uneasy about either seeing wines from Israel or wine from Palestine, which we have on our wine list. But it's also people eating like kubania, like raw lamb, because we serve small plates, and because nobody can pronounce our food, and because it's really dark, people try things. One of my friends actually, who's now a judge in Allentown, his brother graduated from law school, and he was like, can you cater our, Sam's, he just passed the bar, and can you, cater his like party? And I was like, yeah, sure. We don't really do that, but yeah, this was over 10 years ago. And he was like, you got to make that like raw lamb thing. I was like, you want me to make kubania for your like Allentown family? Are you sure? And he was like, it's my favorite thing ever, please. And I was like, all right. So yeah, the Palestinian dish is kubania. The Lebanese pronunciation that might be more popular in the US is kibenaya or kibenei. And it's chopped lamb with bulgur wheat. And it's served raw. This version is served raw. And I love it. I think it's good. I brought it. I made like 20 pounds of this.
Oh my God.
And it was outside and it was really dark. And his whole family wolfed down 20 pounds of raw lamb in under 10 minutes. Everybody came in the kitchen and they were like, that's the best tomato salad I've ever had in my life. So if at minimum we're fooling people into eating raw lamb or eating things that they cannot pronounce or are scared of or have grown up thinking that that is like somehow sleeping with the enemy, then I want them to be able to feel comfortable at Zahav. But I think the way to do that is to emotionally disarm them.
Yes.
And none of you are going to trust me when I serve you a tomato salad. It's okay. Just eat it. It's delicious.
Amanda. Actually, Mike, when you said kibbeh, Amanda and I shared a chuckle because we did a trip to Jordan back in 2019 together. And we had the opportunity to cook with and interact with Syrian refugees who were living in Jordan. We were able to both visit a Syrian refugee camp, working with the United Nations, and then we also had an opportunity to cook with some of the people living in the community who had worked and made their way out of the refugee camp. We made a lot of kibbeh with the Syrian refugee community, and it was delicious and amazing. And we really enjoyed that. My question would be, do you think food can be used as an effective tool in bringing people together around shared challenges? As I was just talking about, we were learning from the Syrian refugees a bit about their culture, about their struggle, their situation. Do you think that that food can bring people together?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to that is obviously yes. And the situation that we got to experience, we went to Zatari, this refugee camp, and we were allowed to go into a home and cook with a mom, and her kids were running around. And I think the most impactful thing, well, there's so many things, but one of the most impactful thing was the kids were happy. They didn't know anything else. This was their home. Their mom was there, and they're running around playing, and everybody was just being kids, and moms were worried about feeding their kids and making sure their kids were okay. And they welcomed us into their home, which was obviously very simple. A hot plate, a sink, and then a living area with no furniture. We just did everything on the floor. So it was myself and Mark Murphy that cooked with this one woman. And again, no translation, just the act of showing us the food, how it's mixed. We all tasted it together, and then sat on the floor and formed the kibbeh. And the joy in her eyes and the comedy of seeing us try to make it and not being able to was fantastic. And we had a great experience exchanging. She taught us something, and we'll take that back with us forever. And in every home, there were other chefs, and we all came together at a common eating area and shared our food. And it was all of the women from those homes, and then all the chefs that made the food together. And we could have been anywhere, right? We could have been sitting at a table in your restaurant, the way that we were sharing food, but we were in the middle of a refugee camp. And I think one of the other important things, when we were saying goodbye, we were there for half a day. There were tears and hugs and emotion that was hard to gauge on a level of just meeting somebody and just making food together. I think, again, it was really important for me to grab somebody who would translate and say to these people, we know you're here. We are thinking about you. We will never forget this experience. And the only thing that got us there was the food. Truly was the food. We wanted to share food with them. We wanted to learn about their culture. And then when we were outside of the camp, we went to a home where there was a family of Syrians, and there were people who have landed there, and they had quite a journey. And there was one woman who, cooked for us, and the amount of food is out of control. The generosity, and I'm sure a lot of you know this, the people with the least always give the most, especially when it comes to food. We could never finish what was on the table throughout that whole trip. The Jordanians, the Syrians, everybody. We always felt like we had to, otherwise it would be an insult. But the generosity of food was insane. And so we were invited into this home. We all cooked together. And there was one woman who we really wanted to hear her story, but she was very shy. And once the food got on the table, once we all started to relax and eat, she started to share her story of how she came across the border with her children. And the one thing that's most important and that goes from generation to generation is she took her food and her recipes with her and she brought it there. And that will live on. Even if she left her home, she left family, she left her husband, she had heartache, she had health issues, but she continued to cook the food that reminded her of home. And that was the thing that gave her comfort. And she wanted to share that with us. And she really only wanted to tell her story after we ate, which was fascinating to me. And again, not a dry eye at
I
that
mean,
table that night.
Every
because,
person table.
Yeah, it was really something that, we'll never really experience or understand. And again, it's hard to describe. I wish I had a better word for the generosity of spirit, of food, of that culture in sharing their stories and the love of that recipe passed down from generation to generation to generation, whatever it may be and whatever you call it, because everybody has different names for everything. And it's amazing how many different versions there are in different cultures of just, let's say, kibbeh alone.
We're talking about how when people are displaced from their homes, how food is a really powerful way to be able to hold on to your culture. It anchors you in your culture. And a lot of people, when they are fleeing, they're grabbing those family recipes because that's the story. That's their family story in those recipes. When we're talking about also these, food, helping around these sort of shared challenges, I also just wanted to ask you about just when refugees are leaving, when as we're seeing in Armenia right now with 100,000 people coming into Armenia, what is the importance that you see food playing in that situation also?
Well, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of World Central Kitchen. We were just talking about an organization run by Jose Andres, very famous chef, who is actually on the ground in Armenia right now. And they kind of call themselves food first responders, and they're feeding people who are coming in from the borders. And the best part about the fact that that organization is run by chefs is that they understand that they're not going to give a ham and cheese sandwich to an Armenian and that's going to make them feel at home or better or even sustained, right? They're going to learn about that food and they're going to give them lavash and they're going to, give them the things that they're familiar with and lamb, and they're going to give them the flavors that they understand. And I know that sounds almost luxurious, but it's a connection. It's an instant security feeling when you're eating your food, your comfort food. And whatever it is to anybody here in this room, you know what it is. You know what it is, that thing that makes you feel at home. So I think it's really important. And I know Armenians are embracing their refugees that way, because honestly, even when I was there was a lot of talk about what had happened previously, and they still felt the pain of it, but they were so proud of their food culture and overcoming some of those challenges.
We talked about, you were mentioning the, people having the same dishes in different cultures called different things. Mike, when we were in Jordan, it was interesting because, there was falafel in Jordan and it was a breakfast food. They had these like stops where you could, jump in and get your falafel sandwich and that was your breakfast. And it was amazing.
Best breakfast ever.
Best falafel for breakfast. Don't miss it. It's a great thing. There are so many different dishes that are claimed by different cultures and it can be contentious. Why is that not instead a common thread? Why is it not something that we can see, oh, we all have these things, they connect us? Why do you think it becomes sort of?
Well, I mean, I'm not the person that's going to answer that question. I try to find commonality in
Right, of course.
everything. I also feel like trace anything back to its origin, it usually contradicts whatever statement everybody's trying to make.
Right.
But I mean, I think that from a very human perspective, if you are marginalized or oppressed or the other negative things that humans do to one another, and you see somebody else taking credit for your dish, it would piss you off. I mean, there's just no question. And I also think that, like, in terms of people that are displaced and are trying to grasp at what home is, these food traditions are sometimes the only things that they have. Right? I mean, like, literally. So I think that, you know, I mean, falafel is 4th century Coptic Christian. It's not Jordanian, it's not Palestinian, it's not Israeli, but, I could obviously see, like, why people would want, like, not me making falafel, right? Even though ours is very good. And we're not open for breakfast, but maybe we should be after this trip. But so I think that that's it. But I mean, food is so emotional. I mean, I hate, we are in culinary diplomacy, and it's a choice that we make. Whether it's going to work or not, it really doesn't matter, but it's the intention, right? And so I don't think that I'm going to make challah or make like kubis or like pita or whatever, and there's going to be peace between, Israelis or Palestinians in my case. But I'm also like, am I going to not try this? I mean, because in a lot of ways, official diplomacy doesn't serve the interest of the people that it's sort of trying to protect or trying to make peace with. So it's a choice that we make. And I do think that food is incredibly emotional. And I think if it literally humanizes the other side, then you have to embrace it and have to go with it.
There was an organization, I don't know if it's still there. It was a while ago now. I think this was back in 2013, when we had a chef go to Israel, and he worked with an organization that was called Chefs for Peace. And it was Israeli and Palestinian chefs, and they would cook together. And so I would think in that type of a setting, the fact that you do have that commonality, like that could be used to connect.
I agree. I think that there's a lot of sort of forces against that, and I think that there is hesitation and apprehension on either of those sides. I also think that when you start making things sort of official, sponsored by a government, it takes away a little bit of the sort of human inclination to, like, just want to get along. There's plenty of, Israeli and Palestinians and Turks and Armenians, or maybe Azeris and Armenians, that are like cooking and working together. They just get no press, and I'm not, so I think that, while maybe from where we're standing right now, it makes sense for Israelis and Palestinian chefs to cook together, there's, 75 plus years of reasons why it would be extremely offensive to those. And, that's just kind of what it is. I mean, these are things that we have to fight against, or I want to fight against, and these are things that I want to promote, but I understand why there is apprehension, why there is anti-normalization, why there is, racism, like all these things that unfortunately are also very, very human that exist.
Yeah. Well, I also think, Lauren, to just touch upon even the history of what you started, really it was started in the State Department, and then you continued it as a nonprofit. Really, the beginning of that was us as American chefs wanting to show the rest of the world that we're just not hamburgers, hot dogs, and French fries, that you have a passion for your cultural cuisine. I have a passion for, cuisines that I've learned about, French, Spanish, Italian, that American culture and American food, is different in every region, in New Orleans, in the Pacific Northwest, in Maine, like, I think that it for a really long time, and still the rest of the world doesn't understand that American cuisine is very regional. We're busy learning about other cultures all the time and their foods, and we're bringing them back here to introduce them to Americans. But I think it's really important also to introduce American food, which is still getting defined, to the rest of the world. And I think that's something that, it goes both ways. And I think it's, when I was in Armenia, the main message that I think the Armenians wanted me to bring back to the US was like, we have a specific style of food. It should be represented more. When you said about getting press, certain things get pressed, certain things don't, there's not a lot of representation of Armenian food here. And I don't think Americans understand what it is, but also vice versa. You know, when you go to another part of the world and somebody wants to interpret American food, what is it normally? A hamburger and French fries. You know, we're so much more. So I think there's a long journey of getting that out as well, you know, on the flip side.
Yeah, hot dogs just have to be the vehicle for that.
Yes, exactly. That's the gateway dish, the hot dog.
The gateway dish.
Well, Mike, you were saying, you know, that things get sort of more complicated when governments get involved. And so,
Not necessarily. Yeah.
but I mean, I think, I think that what is so valuable about chefs as ambassadors and connectors, is that you can on your own go out and sort of make these connections and do this engagement and take it away from maybe some of the sensitivities of government.
Agreed.
And so I think you've both been very effective in doing that in your careers. You know, I know that we want to get to questions, but I do want to ask you a final question, in that, you know, how can individuals and communities engage in culinary diplomacy on a smaller scale and outside of government?
I mean, I think the simplest way is to I think the easiest way is just to eat and engage. I mean, I don't think that that's the beautiful thing about food, is that when made properly, it tastes delicious and it really doesn't matter where you stand. So I think that's it. I think there's marginalized communities, immigrant communities, and refugee communities in the US that are in need of, you know, Instagram posts. And I actually think, you know, University City, or otherwise known as West Philadelphia, does a great job of that. I mean, it really is a great place. So I think that's it. I think that finding new cuisines, not new communities, Philly has a ton of them, and supporting places that are not well represented because they probably don't have the budget for, you know, advertising or PR or anything like that. That's the easiest way to be supportive. And I think obviously keeping an open mind, and quite frankly, having forums like this where we can just talk freely. And this is where things like this should be happening. So
I agree with that. We have to seek it out. And I think like sometimes our job is to go to that Burmese restaurant and post on our Instagram and say, you guys got to check this out, you know, or whatever it may be, because you learn so much about a country or a place through food. You know, once you start to eat their food, you know their history.
I think I'm supposed to open this up for questions. There's a microphone right there. I'm supposed to tell you. So we'll open it up for questions now. I think we've got some folks online who also can ask some questions.
Yes, and I'm here representing the online audience. Oops, just went away one moment. Okay, so Mike, what has been the reaction of your restaurant from Palestinians here in Philadelphia? Do you feel like your restaurant has opened doors for conversations within Pennsylvania?
That's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I think that there have been positive and negative reactions. I'm not totally immersed. I'm not Palestinian. And I would say that my Palestinian friends like my restaurant. I think that there's like a lot sort of behind that. So I would imagine that the reaction could be between lukewarm, positive, and negative. As far as opening up a conversation, yeah, of course, I'm happy to. I think it's a important thing to do, and I think it spans beyond Philly or Pennsylvania or even the United States. How's that for a non-answer?
Perfect.
Good.
Very diplomatic.
Thank you. That's me.
So thank you all for this panel is incredible. So I want to start my question with 2 words: dessert hummus. So I'm a mom.
No.
I shop in the shop, right?
Stop. Israelis and Palestinians can agree that that is bullshit. Yeah, get out of here.
So I taught a class on international affairs, and when I brought up dessert hummus, everybody lost their minds. But I wanted to ask, with something like this, is it cultural appropriation or appreciation? And what are the best and worst examples of this you've seen in your culinary history of a food being taken out of context or perhaps appreciated, or I guess in dessert hummus, not appreciated?
You all know my opinion about dessert hummus. There is, I can't remember the name of the Moroccan dish. There's actually an almond argan oil puree that would be closer technically to like a territoire that is actually eaten with bread that is excellent. And the kanafa is also eaten usually in between like hamburger buns in Palestine in different regions. So it's, you know, but dessert hummus I think is not acceptable and should be illegal. But I think that as far as like appropriation, I don't know. I mean, I'm accused of appropriation all the time. I don't think that I do. I also think that it is the biggest form of flattery to have people cook your food. And you know, my food is appropriated by like other Israeli American chefs. Like I'm flattered, slightly insecure because I'm still a line cook at heart. But I think that there are things that are real and pressing, politically, ideologically, culturally. To me, I don't know. I feel like I speak about appropriation all the time when it comes to food, and I'm like just bored of it.
Well, just to put it in a weird perspective, actually, because we do this competition show called Chopped. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
Maybe you've heard of it. Little show called Chop.
The line cook in me or the chef in me gets a little heated, and you can maybe see it in my colleagues when somebody presents something as a dish and they might say, oh, this is my dessert hummus, please enjoy. You know, it's like, or this is my carpaccio and it's made from, you know, cooked ingredients. You know, we see dishes presented as a completely misrepresented. And then that's out there in the media, and then people watch that and they think, oh, that's what that is. So is it our job to correct? Do we want to correct? Do we want to squash the creativity? You know, it's like we have to somehow keep some things in the proper definition of what they are. So it's a very fine line to walk because it's been stretched, right? Especially when it comes to dish titles and menu and having fun calling things a certain thing, but it gets out of control a lot.
It does.
Yeah. Anyway.
Right. If there's one thing everyone takes away from this is that dessert hummus is not acceptable.
Yes, agreed.
Also,
You're chopped if you present that.
I actually remember at this culinary competition in my culinary school that was not judged by Chef Amanda Freitag, but this kid made pineapple carpaccio. And I was like,
See,
it was
this is what
also
I'm talking
cooked, and I
about.
was like, this is silly, but
Do we educate or do we
I
let
don't-
them go?
I don't know. You know, I think if it tastes good, like who really cares?
Yeah.
No?
See, we have another question.
I'm impressed that when we talk about the food culture and its universality, and that's the vehicle that you use, diplomacy, doesn't alcohol screw that up? I mean, we start talking about the Armenian cuisine, right away you're into the wines. Since so many people disagree over alcohol, it would seem to me that you leave that out if you're looking for the common denominator diplomatically. Now, my youngest son is a chef, but he's also a recovering alcoholic. So I understand it.
Well, that's great. I'm a chef and a recovering alcoholic and drug addict. I don't drink personally. One could argue that a little bit of wine might actually loosen things up, but I don't know. Plenty of people drink and love alcohol, and you know, the non-alcoholic or the NA drink scene has really taken off as well, and I think that makes things more universal. Before it was like, you know, for the past 15 years, it's like club soda, cranberry juice, maybe with lime on the weekends, you know? So it's nice now to have so many different options as well. How much sobriety does your son have?
I think so far, a year.
Congratulations to him. It's a big deal.
It's even worse though. He and his partner, who both started out as chefs in Portland, Oregon, they sell wine. They make wine and sell wine. So he's in a wine business with his partner for 30 years and and he always said, by the way, you never swallow, you spit when you do the tasting. So he still gets in on some of that. Now, I'm not sure how that works.
That's a very fine line right there.
Yeah, I would say that my drug, you know what, this is totally off topic, but I'm really proud of your son, and it's a big deal that you can talk about that. And 1 year is like the hardest thing to do, the first year. When I was in drug rehab, we opened Zahav, completely unrelated to what we're talking about, but I don't care. I have a mic. I can say whatever I want. We opened Zahav, and like 3 months later, I was in drug rehab, and I'd been hiding an addiction from my business partner, from my wife at the time, all this. And I remember being in like a session at this outpatient rehab in Chester County. And I was like, and they were like, the counselor's like, you can't do anything. You can't drink. And I was like, wait a minute. I'm a chef and I own a restaurant, and yeah, alcohol is not my drug of choice. And they were like, Mike, it's 8 o'clock in the morning and you're in rehab trying to argue with your drug counselor on why you should be able to drink. Maybe you have a problem with alcohol. So at first I was like, I'm just going to spit, but I, you know, it is really complicated. It is great that we're in a world right now where there are other options besides just booze.
I'm going to add 2 quick things to that. Classically, food and wine have always been presented together. We'll blame the French for that. Any French people here? But the best part about what's going on as on the flip side in our industry, because it's a very difficult industry and there's a lot of substance abuse in our industry. The stress level is high. The work hard, play hard is culture is high. And the best part about that is it's changing now. And with people like Mike being able to talk about it, changing the culture in restaurants and making it less about substance abuse and more about health and wellness and taking care of yourself and food as medicine. That's much more prevalent now than it ever was. So I think that's a really good thing that's coming our way.
And also, I just want to say that there are a lot of countries that don't drink alcohol. And so when we're traveling and when we're doing our engagements, alcohol is never a component of what we're doing. We could be at something and they serve us alcohol, but we have never actually worked with alcohol partners or factored that into our engagement, because you also just don't know who's dining with you and what their beliefs are. So thank you for that question.
Hello, thank you so much for the opportunity. So I think one of the the most important aspects of gastro diplomacy is the diaspora that goes all around the world, as you said, bringing their recipes with them. But I think the biggest challenge is sometimes the difficulty to source ingredients and special spices and whatnot to make their dishes authentically. So I was wanting to hear like whether you had experiences with that, and perhaps the approaches one can take to try to resolve that.
Yeah, I actually was sort of talking about this earlier, but luckily spices and spice blends are much easier. High quality spices and spice blends are much more accessible now than they were like 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, and pretty readily available if you order on Amazon or whatever. I mean, there's good spice blenders and there's makers and there's importers that take it very seriously. And because so many people have sort of moved around, immigrated, migrated, I feel like the use of spice blends to imply something that is classic and traditional has been a lot easier. So I think that, you can do a lot with really good quality spices. And I think that regardless of where you are, adapting to the local sort of perishable produce, I think it's kind of easier to navigate.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, when we were in Israel and we were with Adina Sussman and we were going through the markets and I was looking at the spices and, there was za'atar that would look green and wet. And, I was like, I want to take it home. I want to put it in my luggage. And, I was with a friend who lives in New York and she said, well, you can get that at Kalustyan's. Just, you don't have to put it in your luggage. And I remember listening to her. And I was really pissed off when I got home that I listened to her because it was not the same. I went home looking for that very same thing and it was not the same. So the problem is we're probably not allowed to put that in our luggage, but it is very different when you are there and it's the terroir and it is of the place. So sometimes you just can't get it as good. We're trying, we have access to more, but it isn't the same. And New York, Philly, yes, we have access to all that. But if you're in the middle of the country and you're trying to make, you know, an authentic Israeli dish or Thai dish or Japanese or Korean dish, you may not be able to get those things at all. You know, we're lucky because we live in bigger cities with a mix of cultures that bring those spices here.
I got tips for you next time you travel, but I'll tell you offline.
Tell me
So
later.
when we first opened
Definitely not.
Zahav, there's a couple like things that I absolutely have to have. One of them, it's called hawaj. It's the word for blend. It would be the same as curry or baharat. There's like many different kinds of blends. The one that I love the most is this like Yemeni chicken soup spice that's turmeric, cumin, black pepper, sometimes cardamom. And my favorite thing is it's like Yemeni stew, basically with chicken or beef, right? Fasa, it's like the best, right? And the spices are incredible, but the quality of turmeric, especially 15 years ago, totally sucked in the States. So every time my family would visit from Israel, their instruction was to bring back this hawaj in their like luggage and suitcase, which meant that their undergarments smelled like soup spice for their entire visit. And I lived in South Philly and like I remember distinctly my mom putting on like what was a white blouse that turned like a little bit yellow and getting like attacked by dogs on the street because it was just like she smelled like stew. But so it is much easier now, but the quality of our demand, like we need, I don't know, I don't want to promote you too much. I'm going to. Chef Amanda's working with our good friend Lior, who owns Le Boite in New York, and they get the most incredible spices that you can order. When is your line coming out?
Well, my spice line is out. I have 5 different blends that I work with Lior, and I wish I could take you all right now into his space in New York, because as soon as you walk in there, the aromas are insane. And the difference when you look at some of his spices, the color, the feel, the smell from what you could get in a grocery store, or what you could get even in a Whole Foods is astounding. Everything he does is fresh. He turns it over. Everything's imported from Israel mostly. And to me, it's important to teach people that, you know, the spice blends or the pure spices, when they're that fresh and when they're that particularly sourced, they're completely different to cook with. You can purchase my spices online. His store is in New York City. You can, yeah, you could go inside his store. It's on the west side on 51st and 9th, I
Yeah,
believe.
it's in Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's incredible.
but mostly e-commerce for his spices and mine.
Tell him you're friends with Amanda.
Hi.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, thank you so much for your time. I have a question regarding your choice between accessibility versus authenticity. And this goes in 2 parts. First of all is pricing. Second of all is the naming of your dishes. So in terms of pricing, I think there's that choice between making the restaurant, you know, at an affordable, like very affordable, very accessible price where many people will be able to try and experience the dishes that you want to spread. But there's also the other end, which is to go premium, and then you present the food in a really nice way, but also make it a little bit more exclusive. So how do you choose between the accessibility and I guess that's the presentation. And on the second layer is accessibility versus authenticity in terms of naming. So we see a lot of cuisines in the US, for example, like Chinese cuisine, they're named as slow braised beef. Well, they have a different name. Well, for a lot of other cuisines, it's called, like, for example, kibbeh, and it's for you to learn what kibbeh means and memorize it. So when you're making the menu or in your observation, has there been any debate or choice, like deliberation on, do you call it kibbeh? Do you call it, you know, raw lamb marinated in a certain way to make it easier to understand and memorize?
That's a great question. Do you mind if I take it?
No, no,
So
no.
when we first opened Zahav, we had no descriptions, and although our menu was English, it was the English pronunciation of Hebrew, Arabic, Bulgarian, whatever. So it would be like malawach, you know, tomato, whatever. And it meant that every server was at the table for 45 minutes explaining everything. So it depends. I mean, I think that the more people sort of, I don't know, people eat sort of globally, so I think they get it a little bit more. It is sort of a fine line. You're also kind of marketing dishes, restaurants, the experience. And I think all those considerations have to take place from a business perspective. As an operator, you just want to be at 100% capacity, right? So you can work all these things out. We were talking about, we're in this industry where like price of goods, price of labor, price of real estate is up substantially more than it was like 5 years ago. And so it's almost, kind of an impossible scenario. So you want things to be affordable, which you can do a little bit better in Philly than you can in New York, right? Because this is the best city ever. And you want to be full, but the restaurants are not, there are a lot of ways to make not a lot of money that are not restaurants. But I think, and as far as authenticity goes, that's such a weird thing to contemplate when it comes to food. I mean, depending on what side of the street you are in certain towns all over the world, something is authentic versus not. And the only real truth is that food moves and changes all the time. And it's like such a subjective, such a visceral thing that like absolutism when it comes to food, I think is like kind of nonsense.
I think we have time for one last question.
Hi, when I think about cultural diplomacy, I think of Anthony Bourdain and his show that really highlighted the stories and culture of the places he went to. And he chose places like Beirut and Cuba and Palestine and all those places. Can you comment on those type of shows that are highlighting culture, but also, can you also talk about the new age of people who are now like all these YouTubers that are going to different places and trying the different foods? And you have these YouTubers now who are going to more like more problematic regions, I guess, like people who are going to Xinjiang and highlighting Uyghur food, and people going to Russia, people going to like Crimea and all those places. And do you see any pushback with that?
I mean, I think it's really important to keep that going, honestly. I mean, I think what Anthony Bourdain did was open doors that we could never open for ourselves. And he went into people's homes and those were the best meals that he had, or the street food, or the foods that were introduced to him by the locals, and I think we all had that desire to be sitting at that table with him. And not everybody has access to that. So we got to watch and we got to learn. And I think if it's a YouTuber, or if it's an influencer, or if it's a celebrity chef, or if it's a passionate cook going into other regions of the world and putting it out there on any platform and educating us and showing off, like we were saying, those cuisines that not everybody ever gets to see, I think it's great. I think it's really important. I think you have to take everything with a grain of salt as to what you see, or like we said, what is it called? What is that dish called? If somebody goes to somewhere and they call it something, maybe they're pronouncing it right, wrong, we don't know, but still it's exposure. I think exposure is good. Not all of us can travel every day to these places. So maybe we can travel through television or through our social media platforms, but I think it's important to keep that going. That's why we travel. That's why we love to travel with other chefs and other writers and other people who have other perspectives, so that we can get it out there to our people who are watching. Not everybody looks at what I'm doing. A lot of people look at what Michael's doing. A lot of people look at what, a food writer's doing. They all want a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think Anthony Bourdain was really the first to humanize every single subject and to go into places where people are overlooked or didn't have, any representation that wasn't like negative. So it's brilliant.
I think also, I just want to add that with food television being global and being in syndication, it's also opened up so many doors. When we went to Jordan, people recognized Amanda and Mark from being on Chopped, and we actually wound up with an invitation from the princess of Jordan because she found out that we were there, and she was a big fan of Amanda and Mark, and it was wild. Like, she was really nervous to meet them, and they were really nervous to meet her, and I'm like, what is happening? Like, it was just, food is pretty amazing. Like, it really does, it makes people connect and feel like they know each other and learn about each other. So I think the food television has changed understanding of food dramatically. I think we can do one more question.
Hi. Okay, so one, I'm fangirling because I watched Chopped. Yeah, and you're on Beat Bobby Flay. Okay, so hi, my name is Gabby Jabril, and I currently serve as the president of student government and the graduate student of education and the vice president of ops for GAPSA. So I have a logistical question. Okay. No worries. So it's more of a logistical question because oftentimes we find that students want to be represented through food because just for a few years they come here and they seek to find community. So I was wondering if there was any way you could become a pen approved vendor, which which would allow student government to purchase from your restaurant. And maybe we can chat offline, but I do think it's important because students do want to see themselves represented through food.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very
That
much.
entrepreneurial spirit right there.
I am, yeah, really flattered. And my business partner, Steve, is a Wharton grad, and we love Penn. So one more question.
Yeah. Okay, just one last. Yeah. You've been waiting so patiently over there. Here, do you want to use mine?
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Got it.
I have a simple question. I think the idea of what you've encouraged people to talk about and the wonderful ability to prepare wonderful meals, and in that way, it brings people together. But I have a question about the preparation of the food, and you've talked a lot about the spices. When you order your spices, it's a simple question. How long can you keep them before they lose their essence?
That's a great question.
That's a great question. I mean, okay, so what everybody before used to do is they'd get these like crappy plastic containers of spices that were ground that sat in a warehouse somewhere. And then they would put them directly like on a spice rack above the oven where it's heated. You don't want to do that. That's bad. I like to, depending on the water content and the oil content of the specific spices, I actually tend to refrigerate a lot, like Urfa biber peppers that are Turkish, that are super oily. I actually keep in the fridge. Cayenne peppers as well, Aleppo peppers too. I tend to refrigerate. And but the reality is, like and Leora might disagree with me, but I don't think people generally use spices as quick as they should. So actually you want to seal as best as you can. And even those like vacuum sealers are really good because air exposure is like the worst thing. It's like heat and air exposure will kill spices. So seal or get a Ziploc bag and like suck the air out, which means that you'll inevitably inhale za'atar, which is also fine. And then I would say if you're buying things in bulk, things that have like sesame seeds in there, I would keep in the fridge.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. Nobody in this room, including myself, can go through spices as fast as Michael can. So it is about using them and buying fresh, but also I think the tendency to buy in bulk is there because it might be less expensive, but I would say buy the smallest amount possible so that you can use them. Because yes, things like sesame or anything that like a dukkha that may have a nut in it, those things will go rancid faster. So cool, dark, dry places, small amounts of spices. And if you have fenugreek from 1985, throw it out.
Yeah, 1985 fenugreek, you just got to get rid of. There's nothing good about that. But I would also say things that you can buy whole large, like cinnamon sticks, I would do that and grind as needed. You can grind it all up. What I would do is make like an oil. I would add oil, olive oil, you know, you could make pesto with basil.
Pesto.
You could do the same thing with parsley. But to me, I would blend it with olive oil and I would stick it in ice cube trays, throw it in the freezer, wait till it freezes, pop them out and put them in bags. Because I don't have a life. And then I would write a haiku about each herb.
I love haikus.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, well, cooking tips and culinary diplomacy today.
yeah.
Thank you guys all for coming out
you so much.
today. And thank
Thank
you,
you.
Mike and Amanda. Thank you, Perry Worldhouse. Thank you so much.
I also want to add my thanks, Lauren, Mike, Amanda. It's really a great pleasure to have you here. This is a really important discussion. As you can see, we could have spent 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, and I think we would still not run out of great discussion. So I hope you'll all be back because this is a discussion that really should continue. I want to thank the audience in the room. I want to thank the audience online. For those of you that are here, there's a special treat waiting for you that might be connected to the question of becoming a vendor of the University of Pennsylvania in the student lounge. For everyone else, also want to let you know our next event in this room is on October 17th. The president of the Rockefeller Foundation, Dr. Raj Shah, who's also a Penn alum, will be here, and it'll be a really exciting event. Hope to see many of you. You guys are both very welcome back. You could even cater the reception afterwards if you wish. You can find a recording of this event and all of our events on the website. If you've signed up for the event, you are on our mailing list. Look forward to seeing you back. Thank our speakers again.